right before Hell Week, while we're getting the boats prepared and life jackets and everything, they pulled me into our office and said, "Hey, man, this is a lie, but I'll say we appreciate your time. You're not welcome here anymore." They said it much more, it wasn't so polite and it wasn't so kind. If I was crushed on the day that I was in boot camp and told that I wasn't, qualified to take the test, I mean, that was 10, 20, 30x more because I was there and they're like, "Yeah, you made it here, but we don't want you here."
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Casazza, the author of the upcoming memoir, Training with a SEAL. Today's guest is a former Navy SEAL. He served for 15 years. He started his training as a hospital corpsman. He served 3 combat tours in Iraq and participated in over 250 highly classified combat and advanced special operations missions. Today, he is the CEO of the Trident Approach and is a psychedelic integration coach. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you, Diego Ugalde. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I am really excited. So you have an incredible story that I just think, and I just want to tell everyone who's listening right now, this story, it's worth listening to. It's absolutely incredible. And I'm going to kind of give a little speed up in it because it is a long, insane story. And so you were not doing very well in school and you didn't know what to do. So you decided you wanted to be a paramedic. Is that correct? And
yes.
So and then one summer, so you were, what I liked about your story right away, I'm just going to say, once you knew what you wanted to be a paramedic, you were taking CPR courses and you were around 16. Is that correct?
Yes.
And not many people, some people are like, I want to be this. And then they just wait until the opportunity comes to be that, or they get into college to do that. And for you always seem to, from your stories, take the initiative. And is that someone that you've always been?
I think in some ways, 100% yes.
Yeah.
And in other ways, 100% no. Like you said, I was struggling in school. So all the initiative that was required in order to be successful in school, I had none organically. It was swimming through mire. It was swimming against the universal current, doing that stuff. But when I found things that I was super aligned with, what do I need to do to make this happen? So it's just balance of some things I love and some things I wanted nothing to do with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that you, like I said, we're taking that initiative. And then you and your friend one summer, every Friday, you guys would rent movies and you rented a Navy SEAL or movie and you were watching it and you were like, that's what I want to be. I want to do paramedic Navy SEAL. Is that I'm still on it? Correct?
Yeah, it was when the movie was going on, I was just blown away that there was such a thing as this. And then in about 20 minutes into the movie or so, I found out that they had a paramedic on their team, and that was it. I was like, that's what I'm doing. That's it.
So did you, like you did with the paramedic, when you knew you were taking CPR classes and stuff, was it the same thing with when you were like, okay, I want to be a SEAL? Did you start running or were you already running? Were you swimming? Were you practicing for that?
Yes. And so I was playing football and all that, but things changed. It's not just football shape is very different from SEAL shape. That's for sure. And then especially back then. So we're talking about in whatever it was, 1990 or so. There wasn't a lot known about the SEALs. And so anyway, I knew how to swim, but I wasn't a good swimmer. So I tried to join the water polo team, but I told the coach why I was there. I wasn't there to become an amazing water polo player. I was there to become a SEAL. And so he was kind enough to just let me swim back and forth while water polo practice was going on at 5:00 in the morning. And so the interesting thing was the first time I tried I couldn't even do I couldn't even swim back and forth without having to stop. I just could not, because I was a wide receiver and I felt like I was in good shape, and I was in some ways, but for swimming I was in no shape. And the interesting thing about swimming and surfing and things like that is, you can show up not knowing how to, or not being able to swim 2 laps, but in a month or 2 months, I mean, I think it, and I'm not overstating. I think it was somewhere around the area of like 3 or 4 months later, I swam 5 miles in the pool. So it you just keep going, and then
Yeah.
the muscles learn, they learn, somehow. So it's not the same as like, hey, I can't run across around the block, and 3 months later I'm running 30 miles. Like that's not how that works. But with swimming, it does. And so I was really grateful for his. And every once in a while, he would break away from practice and being like, "Hey, dude, you're sticking your head out of the water, and that's not going to help you." The little tips like that and that
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So I was really lucky to have somebody to do that who didn't say, "Yeah, no, this isn't the place for you. Go figure it out someplace else." So yeah.
That's awesome. Now, what was going did you get frustrated at all like when you were swimming and could only do like 2 times and you were just like done? Like was it frustrating at all, or was it like, okay, I got to keep working at it?
I think yes, and I think it's hard to think. I remember specifically standing up in the middle of the lane or in the middle of the lap, having some sort of reaction of like, "Whoa, dude!" You know what I mean? I don't know how intense that was. There's like a little, almost like a cartoon frame of that, if that makes sense. But I can't remember the process of, or the thought process of, no matter what, I'm going to keep going. Like I don't know. Like I said, I was able to swim 5 miles in just a couple of months' time. I don't know what I would have done or how it would have been if 3 months later I was swimming like 4 laps and then having to stop. Like I don't know what that would have
Yeah.
done, but the progress happened so quickly that I think that it kind of came addicting. And now knowing what I know about flow and how important that is to human performance of like advancing and that kind of thing, it absolutely kept me in the game and kept me going and provided fuel. It was like, holy
Yeah.
crap, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to swim 5 miles in the pool today. And that's, when you're growing and developing, I was able to be in that space, that mindset space. Then it was like nothing was going to stop me. You know
Mhm.
what I mean?
Mhm.
It could have been a far cry if those muscle development things took as long as running did. Because I was like, man, I don't know if this is for me. Like, who knows what it would have
Yeah.
been like.
So I want to actually talk about the running part because
I
um now I'm going to speed it up a little bit.
just had to laugh.
Yeah. So you were I'm trying to now remember where in the story.
So
Okay,
maybe you're,
you
yeah,
failed. Well, first of all, you then were gonna go be a Navy SEAL. You had to take a test, and then you found out just as you were going to do the physical test that you failed the test. No, that you didn't fail. You just didn't. You were supposed to get a 50 and you got a 48, and
yeah,
weren't able to then become a SEAL. You had to then do, I guess, the hospital corpsman. Is that correct?
yes, and so back then, in order to go to SEAL training, you had to have a, one of, I think, like maybe 16 jobs that exist in the Navy in
Mhm.
order to go, because the odds are that you're not going to make it through training. So you need a job to go back to. But
Oh, I
then,
didn't know that. Oh,
yeah, and if you do make it, there's only you know, I can't remember the numbers right, but I think it was somewhere around. There's only 16 jobs in the Navy that were included in the SEAL platoons. So back then, it was not. I think in 2006 is when they changed this. But back then, you need to go to boot camp, and then you need to go to that, what we call an A school, or like a school for one of those qualifications, and then you can go to SEAL training. Nowadays, you go from boot camp straight to SEAL training. Hospital corpsman, that was being the paramedic thing. So that was exactly what I needed. It's exactly what I wanted. So after boot camp, I went there. But even before I went to boot camp, they take this test for everyone who joins the military. It's called the ASVAB, Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. So it's like this whole spectrum of reading, writing, arithmetic, mechanical comprehension, like all of this stuff. And they take it to see where your strengths are. And what I was told was that, so there's an overall score for the whole test. What I was told was that that's the score that I needed to qualify for SEAL training, and I did really well on the practice test somehow, even with all my academic struggles. So I wasn't too worried about it. I took the ASVAB, and then I went to boot camp. And then the day I showed up to do my SEAL screening test to like decide whether or not I was going to be able to go to SEAL training after I went to hospital corpsman school, they said, "Hey man, you needed to score a 50 on your mechanical comprehension. You only got a 48. You can't be here." So like that was the first time that I knew anything about that. That there were smaller test scores within the overall test score that I needed to qualify for, and so I was broke. I was just crushed. I was 18 years old. To me, that was like my whole life, and so like all my life was over.
Yeah.
and then, and then it's so funny now. But anyway, it wasn't
I
funny at
think
the time.
we've all experienced, I mean, many of us have experienced that, it's
Yeah,
this
totally.
is your something that you work for, and then suddenly you're just like, oh my gosh, what and so how did you then, what I want to know is when you're so defeated like that, it's the first blow. How do you come back from something like that?
I don't know how one does. I can tell you what I did and how I responded at the time, which I wouldn't. It just is what it is. It's not where I'm at now. It's not how I would respond now. But how I responded at the time first was like I got the initial blow, and I started crying right there. I mean, it was like everything. It was 2 years of working, from the time I was 16 and all that, and then thinking that there was just no real way to ever succeed at anything in life. you know? And this might have been it, but the guy who was conducting the test, because there were like 5 other guys there that were able to go on and proceed with the training. The guy looked at me. He's like, "If you want to do this, you'll do it, and you'll come back." There's this whole other option of like, just going. And to him, he was talking about it as though it was going to be something like that was going to happen like in next month. Which is exactly how I would sound today. But it didn't. At 18 years old, you've only lived 18 years, so 2 years. Like there's a percentage there. I didn't do well in school. I don't know what that percentage is, but it's a percentage. It's like a lot. He told me the plan. What I had to do is I had to go to boot camp, finish boot camp. I had to go to my hospital performance school, and then instead of going to SEAL training, I would have to go to some regular Navy command, start to take classes, retake the ASVAB, and then reapply. And I think that after that initial blow and the emotional, all of that, I was so driven to be there anyway that I don't know. It slowed down the process. It slowed, but it didn't stop anything. It just detoured it, and it was all perfect. But I also didn't understand that either at that age. I was just kind of mindlessly going through life, really.
How long was that from when you failed the test to having to being able to retake the test?
2 years.
Two
Yeah.
years. Wow. Now,
Mm-hmm.
when did you, I mean, because I'm the same. I'm like, oh, in 1 month I get to retake. Like, so,
Yeah.
and then it's a 2 years. So, how did that 2 year period feel? And then when you went to go and take that test again, was there a lot of pressure that you put on yourself to pass?
I got ASVAB for dummies, and I just it's so funny. It was just like swimming because I never I never even thought about mechanical comprehension before I took the ASVAB. And then when I took the ASVAB for dummies, and like for example, like one of the questions they'll have is they'll have like 3 gears, and like, hey, this gear is turning this way, it's attached to this gear, it's attached to this gear. What gear is what direction? Stuff like that, like fulcrums and leverage, all that stuff. I never thought about, but I took the ASVAB for dummies, and I'm like, this stuff, this is not hard. I just didn't. I was never exposed to it.
Yeah.
At the I don't know what the word is, but my dad was very upset because my dad is like a mechanical dude, like from everything. Like, he was just like, you don't know how to fix cars by the time you're 12? Like, what's your problem kind of thing? I'm like, no. So anyway, if I listened to my dad, I probably would have been there. But anyway, so when I retook the ASVAB, for sure there was the organic nervousness that I think that just comes with any kind of testing mechanism, especially when you don't have any mind awareness whatsoever. but I felt good because I was like, I missed it by 2 points before and I knew nothing. And now I know stuff. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I took it and I smashed it. I like smashed it. And yeah, it was expected, but at the same time, it was an amazing feeling to get those test scores back and like, okay, like game on, dude. Now
Yeah.
we're going.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So now you get to go to Buds. Okay.
yeah.
And now, did you train or were you training to get ready for Buds? Did you know how hard it was going to be, or did it just kind of like smack you in the face when you were there?
All of that. Um, I thought I knew how hard it was going to be, and I also was aware, sort of, that there's no real way to know, and that's exactly what it was. So I was training. Buds was my whole life, and then I met a woman, and she was awesome. And I was living in a barracks and she lived in an apartment and I was eating at the chow hall and she was cooking meals and stuff like that. And all of a sudden my focus started to, it wasn't my sole purpose in life anymore to be a SEAL. I was extremely happy with this woman and everything. And so when I went home for the holidays and saw my friends from high school, they're like, "What's up, Diego? You looks like you're gaining some weight, man. You're like trying to be a SEAL or something like that." I'm like, "I'm good, dude. They're not going to make me quit. So I'm all set." So I was like I was like becoming soft because I'm telling you, I was sleeping out on purpose on the streets in the rain just because I thought that's what SEALs did. Like I was crazy. Um, and then she came along. I'm like, man, there's a bed with sheets and pillows and stuff like that. Like I'm gonna start doing this. And I wasn't even old enough to drink yet. She was old enough, so she was bringing back beers and stuff like that. So I was just living like this life I had never experienced before. And so I was training, I was going to San Francisco, I was running on the beach and I was swimming in the ocean and all that, but it was all totally within my comfort zone. It was all totally on my terms. I was not preparing myself to go into the world's hardest military training. I just wasn't doing that. I was doing stuff, but not what I needed to do. So, but that was my mentality. So I was 18 years old or whatever, 19 or 20 at this point, but I had the mentality of like a 13-year-old. I was just not mature. I just, there was a whole lot of disconnection that was going on there. And so that was a good thing because I had no business making it anyway. I had no business showing up to the SEAL team with my mindset. But my mindset was that there was nothing they were going to do to make me quit. And, and that's how I chose to go in there. And I'll never forget the first day of training. Um, we showed up and they got us out on the beach. We weren't even a real class yet. There was a bunch of us who had showed up and we were kind of waiting for more people to show up so that we could actually start training. So I think there was like maybe 15 of us and they got us out on the beach and we started to do, there are these soft sand berms that are like 15 feet high or so between the Buds compound and the ocean. And we started doing like these berm sprints up and down, up and down, up and down. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I'm like, I made it. It took all this time. I'm finally here. I'm doing it. I was doing these sprints and I was hanging with everybody and all that. And we were done. I'm like, yes. And they're like, all right, let's go. And they proceeded to go on a 4 mile conditioning run in the soft sand after that. And I mean, like immediately, instantly, I was like 300 feet behind everybody. And I was like, whoa, like those guys are just gone, right? It's just like, and I don't know if she said, but they follow the class around in like these
Yeah.
white pickup trucks and stuff, and they got the radio speaker and like, "What are you doing back here?" And I was like, and I said, "I put out too hard on the berm sprints," and they're like, "Oh God, here's one of these losers," and and for the next 4 months, that was my life in SEAL training. Just I was behind everybody. I was getting smashed, and so for sure, not only was my mind not prepared to be there, my motivation was, but all the other stuff was not there. Well, also my body was not prepared to be there, so it started breaking, and and yeah, I was taking something like 2,400 milligrams of Motrin every day, and My shins were like little bags of fluid swelling over my boots and all this stuff, and shin splints, went on to stress fractures and that kind of thing. And
Oh, no.
I just remember on the weekends, I was so worried because I was a corpsman, so I knew a little bit about medicine, and I knew that taking that much Motrin for such a long time was like not good for the liver. So I started not taking Motrin on the weekends, and on the weekends, like I literally could not walk downstairs. And so I was like, yeah. So it was just bad. It was only a matter of time, but I was so singularly focused on making it that it just didn't. I just showed up every day like a puppy with like no rear view memory at all of just like, yeah, today. And then they're like, dude, you don't have a chance, bro. What do you think? So, but the funny thing is I began to run faster, even despite all that, but still it wasn't fast enough. And then it was like Friday before Hell Week. So I thought I was going into Hell Week. We had already started our class. We had gone through all these things, really huge, giant tests in buds, and I'd passed them all except for I didn't pass a single timed run. And then Friday before Hell Week, while we're getting the boats prepared and life jackets and everything, they pulled me into our office and said, "Hey, man, this is a lie, but I'll say we appreciate your time. You're not welcome here anymore." They said it much more, it wasn't so polite and it wasn't so kind. And so yeah, that was when like literally I grew up in some ways, like a couple of levels in a moment. I was like, oh, I don't deserve this kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like this isn't owed to me by anybody. I got to earn my spot here. Like I learned that in a second. And but if I was crushed on the day that I was in boot camp and told that I wasn't qualified to take the test, I mean that was 10, 20, 30x more because I was there, and they're like, yeah, you made it here, but we don't want you here. Kind of, that's the way I heard it, and
Yeah.
that's the way. Oh man, that was brutal. And not only that, then all of a sudden I really started to really feel the pain in my legs. Like where did this come from? You know what I mean? Like everything started to swell up and everything started to hurt like that minute, Which is funny because like there was like this huge protective mechanism I think that I was putting around myself during that whole thing just because this is all I wanted to do. And thank God I didn't make it through, because if by some weird random chance I made it to the SEAL team, I do, I wouldn't have lasted an afternoon there. There would have been like, who's this monkey, dude? Get him out of here, So I healed up, and then I went on to be a corpsman with the Marines. Kind of a long story, but the Marines don't have their own medics. They get them from the Navy, and they always have. It's a very historical, very honorable thing. It was a tremendous honor to be a medic with the Marines. And then my enlistment contract came up. I could decide whether to stay in the military or leave. And I joined the military to be a SEAL. I wasn't a SEAL, so I decided to leave. So I got out of the military like entirely after that.
Today's podcast episode is brought to you by my absolute favorite company. If you know me or seen videos or photos of me, then you know I always have one on my wrist. I absolutely adore this company. DiscoverOmnia.com. DiscoverOmnia.com is the world's first smart crystal bracelet. Every single bracelet is handmade in the USA using real, genuine crystals made on memory wire. Every bracelet is unisex, and they're also aromatherapy. The cool part is the black onyx charm that is on the bracelet. It scans to your cell phone, connecting you to their Wellness Hub Elevate. You can also access their Wellness Hub Elevate on your computer or tablet. You just have to sign into your account. The bracelet gives you a 12-month membership. It has over 200 pieces of self-care content, from motivational tips, meditations, breathing exercises around the theme of your bracelet, printable journals, and so much more. The content is ever growing. And that's not all. The bracelet also gives you lifetime access to their Elevate Together Club, which meets monthly via Zoom. Each month is themed, giving you actionable takeaways to elevate your life. And with this podcast episode, 40% off your purchase order by using the code MINDSET podcast. Use that code Mindset Podcast for 40% off. Just go to discoveromnia.com. Discoveromnia.com, code Mindset Podcast for 40% off. Get your bracelet today. I want to talk about the first, your first round at Butts right now. I want to go back into this. So, I want to know what was going on in your mind in terms of being like last in the runs, or like, did you know that you were not making those times? Did you know that you were struggling in those runs? What was going on in your mind throughout those runs?
Yeah, those are not subtle things. You know immediately if you're falling back, and if you fall back, I mean, so they have these things called goon squads, and so what'll happen is like you go on this run, and on the way back, maybe a mile or so before you get to the end, they'll make like a cutoff line of like the group that's up with the instructors that's keeping up, and then everybody else who is not keeping up. And when they make that line, and you find out you're in the goon squad, while that group who is able to keep up with the instructors, hydrates and stretches and all that stuff, the goon squad is busy doing more berm sprints and fireman carry lunges in the soft sand and what we call wheelbarrows and all these crazy things. And those are, and it's another, I don't know, there's a certain sense of timelessness. Or I don't know if it's 20 minutes or an hour of just straight beat down. And it's there to serve two purposes. One is if you don't want to be there, that's a good way to find out you don't want to be there. But number two, if you do want to be there, you get stronger. You become a faster runner, maybe. And
maybe.
So, yeah. Well, the X factor is that, maybe your bones aren't on the same page as you are, and they're like, we're done, that kind of thing. If I was able to stay healthy, for sure, I just simply would have been faster. But, I didn't train all the parts of me that needed to be in such a way it is to be prepared for this kind of load. So, I was in every single goon squad that we had. And it's funny because in the teams or people being prepared to be in the teams, that there is nothing valiant about like these heroic finishes. They're like, you need to be finishing strong. You know what I mean? You don't go on a Navy SEAL operation and then you find, you're done, and then you just collapse at the end and be like, oh, I did it. It's like, no, you need to crush these things, and you do it with a smile on your face and whatever, and you can still go on for another 48 hours if you need to. And so I was not doing that. I was barely making it at the pace that I was running, which was not fast enough as it was. I was barely making it across the finish line standing up. Like I was just, but a lot of that too was my mind. And I didn't know anything about my mind at the time. My mind had so much to do with failure because I started to align with it. It started to become part of my identity in the class as the guy who couldn't run. And I didn't understand anything about this at the time, but what I see now is that I was never really kind of given the attention that I wanted to get as a kid, So I would do all kinds of things to get attention, even if it was really bad in attention. At least it was attention. It was like somebody was showing me something. So if my role ended up to be like the slow guy in the class that went through every single goon squad, then that was something that I could hang my hat on. And that doesn't make sense, but it made sense to me it didn't even it was unconscious at the time, subconscious at the time. In the beginning, for sure, all the instructors hate you anyway, but they really hated me. Like they're like, we're spending 90% of our time on this clown. I remember one time the whole class was getting beat, and then all the instructors one day just decided to convene around me in a circle and just kick sand in my face and just told me to quit. And as I was, coughing up this sand and like kind of trying to move my face around and, get the grains of sand out of my hand while I'm on my back doing flutter kicks and stuff, I looked around and I noticed that some of the other guys in the class weren't doing flutter kicks because the instructors weren't even paying attention to them. And I'm like, oh, dude, Like these guys are like, some of these guys are getting to relax. Just, all right, hey, I can do this all day long. Kick all the sand you want. So like it started to become like a badge of honor. But like I said, you don't finish week in the team. So there was half the class presented my, hey, what are you even doing here, dude? You know what I mean? Like this is grown-ups time. And for sure the instructors hated me. And then there was a time we started we so a lot of this happened before training even actually officially started. We hadn't even started first phase yet. And then we started first phase, and that's when you get your helmets and all of that. But people started quitting every day in droves. I mean, I think we started our class out with like 300 and something people. And whatever, in the first couple of weeks, we had like over 150 some people quit. So there were these whole, and you put your helmets
Yeah.
down in this specific place where everyone can see. And there were all these helmets there, and little by little, some people used like a lot of those helmets were there were people who were like destroying me physically, but they quit. And so slowly but surely, I started to kind of win over my class. Like he may not be strong, but like I don't know that I would want his existence in this class. So you keep doing what you're doing, bro. You're like you're doing. They didn't want my experience. I'll say
Yeah.
maybe in those words. And then one day, one of the instructors pulled me aside. He's like, "Dude, keep going." And that was, you might as well have given me freaking 30 pounds of adrenaline and love and hugs and food and everything. Like a real Navy SEAL instructor said, dude, keep going. And these guys hated me, like hated me. And I was like, yeah, here we go. And I'm like, Goon Squad, let's do it. Goon Squad, it's just like, it's this whole brand new breath of air. And we were doing very hard things, like really, really hard training. And again, people were quitting in droves. We were in a winter class. It was freezing. All this stuff was going on, and I was still there. And by this time, I couldn't run, but I was one of the boys, and I was like, let's just keep going. And so there was so much of that kept my focus away from the inevitability of just breaking. Because if they would have let me stay, for example, in fact, the doctor told me if I would have ran until Wednesday, my legs would have broke all the way through and I would
Oh
be
my
able to
God.
walk properly again. So
Wow.
I just, I had no intention of quitting, none. But,
It's it's
there,
it's impressive on the fact that first of all, I want to say I totally understand the whole identity thing that you took on. When I was in Team Eagle One, I was always last. I mean, like I always
yeah.
joke and I'm like, these guys go to order a pizza by the time I got back from the run. Like that's how long
Yeah.
it took me. Okay. Like
You
it was
know what? That's it.
embarrassing. Like my
Mm-hmm.
brothers came to one of my trainings and they were like, we were watching you and we weren't sure if you like stopped or it was like watching slow motion. And we're like, no, 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 she's actually still moving. Like they couldn't believe that like I like, cause that's how slow I was going.
Yeah.
And they were like, you should just get a t-shirt for training that just says to the people, we were in the Santa Monica Beach and they were like, just to let the citizens of America know that you are not serving our country because I think they would be very concerned. And I was just like,
Wow. Yeah.
and so, but
Yeah. The
I
egos come
remember
out.
like I remember saying it to my life coach at the time, and I was just like, it's LA, everyone has a life coach. And I was like, I'm like last all the time. And she's like, well, you see yourself as last because all you are is last, and you're not seeing yourself with the group, and you're taking on that identity of being last. And it's just like,
Yeah.
and she's like, I want you to like say, I'm with the pack and I belong with these guys and start visualizing yourself in the front. And I will tell you, as I started taking on the identity of being with the pack and being with the group, I still was last 90% of the time, but there were moments where I was with the group, where I was
Yeah.
at least like,
Mm-hmm.
close, like at least,
Yeah.
like, and, I really, so I totally understand what you're saying when it comes to that identity that you ended up taking on. And
Yeah.
I find it incredible on the fact that your whole entire body was breaking and yet it didn't matter. You just kept going and going and going because I mean, how you, I mean, you mentioned you're taking Motrin, but I mean, how you block out that pain as you're just getting beat every single day is just, it's very impressive. I'm now, did you feel a lot of it? Or, I mean, you mentioned on the weekends, you really felt it, but during
Mhm.
training, was it like you were just so nothing's going to take me out of it? I'm just not going to think about it. Did you feel it at all?
I felt it because there's just no way getting around that lactic acid when you're lifting the logs and all that stuff. Like that's you feel I felt every millisecond of that. Um, in the boats and all of that. Um, we would run for miles with the boats on our heads, and they were rafts, but they're heavy. And so they're just pounding on your head and all that stuff. Like I felt all of that. Um, and at the same time, there was a lot of things that I went through, I think, as a kid where I learned how to just check out, just I'm here, I'm not here. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes, yeah.
You know, um, so I think it was, yeah, both of those things were happening. I was feeling a lot of physical pain just that goes along with working out in that way. And at the same time, I think there was probably like a monster inside my brain that you're not allowed to be here and you're not welcome here kind of thing. Again, I didn't know a better way to handle it, but that's how I handled it at the time. And so I just shut it down. And, for all I know, that's why my legs broke because I refused to let this monster go. He had to go somewhere. Um, I was 20 years old. My bones were young. You know what I mean? You can handle that stuff, but that energy's got to go somewhere, and I wouldn't let it out. So, you know, and now thinking back, I can absolutely see the wall that I had in my mind when it came to running. It was like, well, this is going to suck, and this is going to be bad, and I'm going to be slow, and this is, all this.
Oh my God,
You
just
just,
my language. I'm gonna suck. It sucks
mm-hmm.
in general. Like it's not fun for me. It's super painful for me. It was
Yeah.
so painful for me. Like I never understood when people were like, I'm just gonna go for a run. It's so fun. I was like, it's so fun. I'm like,
Not a
what
day in
is
my
so
life.
fun? They're like, it
Sunday.
releases endorphins. I said, at what point do I have to
Yeah.
hit where the endorphins? Because I'm not feeling it. Like I mean, like it makes no sense. The only time is like if I'm gonna run and get a snack, like that's
Yeah.
about it. I'm running to the fridge, but aside from that, like it bothered me too because like I just and when I wasn't training with Team Eagle One, like I was like, I gotta get better. Like I have to just start going for a run around the block and then
Mm-hmm.
make it 2 times around the block and 3, like gradually increase. And like the whole entire time, I'm just like, when is the fun gonna kick in? Like where I
Mm-hmm.
don't get it. And I'm like, and when am I gonna get better? And when because it's like you mentioned, it's not like the pool. It seems to me like a very slow, gradual increase for me, like to go from, even just shaving a little seconds off of a mile. I was just like, oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh. And then when you're doing sprints and you're doing it on the sand, and when you're soaking wet and you're doing the sugar cookie and sand all over you, and then you have to go for a run and you're feeling like you have so much, you don't even have like a ruck on, like you just have like all the sand on you, and you have to go run on the dry sand. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. And I'm like, I'm out of breath. And then it feels like you're tasting metal, like blood, because and I'm just like, I don't know if I could, but you just I'm like, all I just was like 1 foot in front of the other, 1 foot in front of the other. But I mean, oh my gosh, the running part. So with you, like you knew all this and everything. And when you left because of that reason, and you quit, um, first of all, I know it took 8 years for you to go back there, correct? Go back to
Yeah,
buds.
but I didn't quit though. They told me
Right.
I
I'm
was like,
sorry. I'm so sorry. I
yeah.
apologize. I
Well, no,
meant to
no, that's
say,
okay. But
I
I
meant
think
to
it's
say like
also
quit, like,
important.
I mean, not quit. You didn't like quit the military. You were done. You were like, you didn't enlist. That's the best way to say it. You didn't
Oh, I
enlist.
see.
That's
Oh,
what I meant
of
to
the
say.
military. Yeah, I
No,
left the
I meant to
military.
say
Yeah,
you quit the military, but you didn't quit. I meant to say like, you didn't re-enlist.
yeah. Well, I guess you look at it like that. Yeah, I quit the military
You see,
afterwards
you left.
because I
You
could have
left.
kept going if I wanted
Yeah.
to. I'm like, I'm not doing it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what sorry, I meant to go. I was going further in the story now where
yeah.
you left the military and went you went to do what? What were you doing?
I became a bartender,
Okay.
and then, which by the way, I ended up staying with that woman, and she was from Boston, so we moved to Boston. I became a lead singer in a rock and roll band, and I went to paramedic school out there. I became a civilian paramedic, and then we moved from there to Florida. I was a paramedic there, and then so over this. So what we're talking about is about 8 years, and then it sounds like you were about to get into like the
Okay.
next point there. Yeah.
So you also mentioned you gained 30 pounds. Is that another true statement or something? You gained a
No,
lot
like
of weight.
70
You were
pounds.
like,
Yeah,
70 pounds. Okay.
yeah.
And then you you decide to try again. You decide to go to buds again. To tell me how this worked.
During that 8 year span, at least minimum 3 times a month, I had some really, really shitty dream about SEAL training, and at least 3 times a month. And so I was in Florida, and I was working nights, and I woke up at like 1 in the afternoon or whatever it was, and I turned on the TV, and on the Discovery Channel they had like a documentary on the Air Force pararescuemen, or the PJs. The they're like the best paramedics in the military, amazing guys, and their training. So SEAL training is called BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. The pararescue school is called INDOC, short for indoctrination. They have like a 90% washout rate. Like it's a really hard program. And so I was looking at it, and I just happened to have one of those dreams just before I woke up, and so turning on the TV and seeing that, and I was just like, the only way these dreams are going to stop is if I go back. So um, I went through several months of trying to figure out, because I love paramedicine so much. I was a really good paramedic. I've always loved medicine. I've always loved taking care of people and that kind of thing. Um, so I several months, maybe even a year, for all I know, of kind of going back and forth. Should I go back to Buds, or should I go be a pararescueman and that kind of thing? And then finally, this is an amazing story, but it's a very long story, so I won't tell it. But I finally decided to. The only way to get that monkey off my back was to go back to Buds. So I did, and so I lost 70 pounds, and this time, I was like 28 at the time,
So that's
and
the
so
like the cutoff, right?
29 is the cutoff. So I
29.
made it
Okay.
back to
You're
training
right
at
there.
29.
Now I'm just gonna pause the story real quick from
Yeah,
when you were like, okay, these nightmares um have to have to stop. Like the only way it's gonna stop is by me re-going. So how much training did you do to them before Buds?
a lot. That was my this. There was no excuses. There was no um, the shock and awe of having this brand new relationship with this woman was over. We were good. We were like in that cruising place. We've been married for 8 years, so like it's like no big deal. Um, or for however long we were married at the time, and yeah, my singular focus, like everything I did, except for the times that I was actually on a call as a paramedic, was I mean everything I ate, the movements I did. Like I didn't even go surfing. You know, I lived in Hawaii for a year. I surfed once. The rest of the time, if I had any other time, I was running. I was doing sit-ups. I was swimming. I was doing all that. I didn't know any better. Surfing was a completely perfect and fine thing to do, but I didn't know at the time. I was just like, my life has to suck. I can't do anything that's fun because Buds isn't fun and all this kind of stuff. I remember I was working out at Ala Moana Park, um, It's like one of those public parks that they have there. And at night, I found out when they had the sprinklers, and I noticed that the sprinklers went across like the sit up station. So I timed it so where I was doing my sit ups while the sprinkler. I was crazy, but is what I wanted. I was just like, this is what I'm gonna do. So I'm sitting there like at 2 o'clock in the morning, just doing sit ups, getting hammered by these sprinklers, and just being like, I'm gonna do this, you know. And it was really interesting because I was training well. I had a personal trainer, and he kind of knew my history and all this stuff. My, you know, so we're trying to take care of myself and that. And one weekend, I just went on a normal day hike up to the top of Diamond Head and back down. And on the way back down, like both my legs had a snap in that they didn't break, but I felt like this snap. And I was like, oh no. And I realized, and all of a sudden, a pain that I hadn't felt in so long was immediately back again. And I was like, man, I'm just walking down from this hike. You know, my legs are, and so I sat there in my Jeep when I got back for a while of, you know, what are you doing? Because, you know, there's all this, it's not just the decision to go back in the middle, like everything is shifting. Everything is just a big, gigantic thing. And, you know, I was kind of like, what am I doing? And I was, it was, it was something that I had no clue of at the time, but that I'm intimately familiar with now is the power of acceptance. And I was like, well, I'm in this. So I'm just going to keep going. I've done it before. I'm just going to go until my legs break. And for whatever reason, just that they never hurt again. They
Wow.
never hurt again. I'm just like, I don't give a fuck if you break. Let's go. It was amazing. It was just, you know, and even then, it's funny because even with that, I still had no idea what I was messing with. I had no idea of the possibilities or the realm that I was actually moving in space. I had no idea, but I let go, and I just, again, I had no idea what I was doing, but that's what happened is I let go, and by letting go, a lot of that just released, I guess, because just hiking down Diamond Head and doing the training that I was doing, I went on to SEAL training, and you know, you run whatever it is, 500 or 600 or 700 miles in that whole time. It didn't happen again. So
Wow. So
yeah,
did running as you were preparing and my life is sucking right now with all I can't do anything fun, like was running getting easier for you? Were you what was how are you the run was the thing that stopped
yeah.
you, so how was it during training and how are you feeling about it?
I think before for running, it was just this arbitrary, nebulous state of sucking.
Mhm.
But when I went back, I was like, this is the thing that I have to do better at, or I'm done. So then it became, we were talking about flow state before. That's also another critical component of actually reaching flow state. Like, I got to give a shit about the outcome of this whole thing, which I didn't necessarily before. I was just running because that's what they do in blood. Like here, I was like, dude, I'm running because I don't want to go through another goon squad again in my life. You know, I don't, you know, I don't want to show up to the SEAL team being the guy who's barely making it across the finish line. That's not what this community is all about. By the way, this is after September 11th, so I knew that when I went through training that I was going to war, which is
Mhm.
what I wanted at the time anyway. So running, my relationship with running changed a lot because there was a purpose now, and there was, and even though it was just me, there were standards and metrics and things like that that I had. So yeah, it changed everything. It still sucked. I agree with you. I've never experienced a runner's high. I've run over 200 miles in a week and all of that. Like, I never saw it. I never, nope. The second time I went back to, I remember clearly, very, very vividly, seeing if I could actually pray for a comet to come out of the sky and blow my ass up in the middle of the run. Cause it hurt so bad to keep up with those guys that I just wanted it to end. So I'm like, please, please, God, don't let there be a comet. And but it never came. I never was obliterated. But I stayed up with the guy. I was never in another goon squad after that.
I just want to know for myself too. For someone that can understand how much that just doesn't like running and stuff, how do you change your relationship with it? I mean, I guess you put a purpose behind it and you had a purpose.
I didn't know enough about mindset at the time to change my relationship with running,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense that it wasn't a deliberate decision. My relationship with running changed. It happened because of now there was purpose. Like I didn't sit like, okay, I didn't sit down and like strategize on how I was going to improve my relationship with running.
That's something I would do.
It just was different because I knew what I was getting into.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't playtime. I knew where I was going. It was going to be dark. It was going to be cold. I was going to be swollen. I was going to be bleeding, and it was going to be hard. And so there were no games. It was a serious, and here's the other thing is like I literally put everything in my life into that because I was so ashamed of not making it through the first time that like if I didn't, I don't even know what I would have done if I failed the second time, because I'm telling like it was that. The funny thing is like people are like, oh, you want to be a SEAL because you could do this and do that. I was like, no, I became a SEAL because I was ashamed of myself. And so I put everything like all in, like the guy at the poker table, all the chips, took my glasses off, took my coat off, watch off. Here it is. And I'm either going to walk away from this thing, whatever. There's so many things that were going on inside the mind and inside of myself and all this stuff that I was completely massively unaware of. But still they were happening nonetheless. Like, for example, my relationship with running, that was not something I deliberately did. It happened just because the stakes that were at hand, this was the most serious thing to me.
So before we get into Bud's round 2, I want to talk about the years leading up to this moment. I want to go back to those nightmares, those like 2 to 3 times a month you're having this and you're feeling so ashamed of yourself. It eats at you. It really eats at you, obviously. And how did you go on day by day by day?
In that same, avoidance wall, absent-mindedness days that I was in when I was in Buds the first time of just checking out, and the same thing when I was a little kid, just checking out of what is going on right now. In some ways, and then other times it would completely come out in not the best ways. And I don't really think I can think of a time or whatever how it did, but it's safe to say I was not living life optimally at the time. And so, well, probably a lot of it came through eating and all that stuff like that. Like I was freaking smashing everything I could get my hands on or whatever, the avoidance and all that, addiction to food. And, that's how all that stuff, it's like a stress ball. When you squeeze it, if you're not dealing with it properly, it's going to pop out somewhere. It's going to pop out in between. So my pop outs were happening, I think, really mostly through food. And then also like these significant moments of mindlessness, just the best way I can explain it is like, you get in the car and all of a sudden you're at work. You're like, how did I get here? That was like a lot of my life, checking out, not being present. I didn't even know to be present. So yeah, a lot of that stuff.
Okay, we're going to stop right here and do a part 2, the first part 2 that we've had on this podcast, and continue with this episode next Wednesday because it is too good and I want to keep these episodes in the hour ballpark, and I know we're going to be definitely going over. So next Wednesday, tune in to listen to the rest of Diego's story. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to become a Patreon member so you get all the goodies to our bonus episodes and so much more. Thank you so much for listening.